Been a busy weekend, hasn't it? D23. There's lots of things to chat about there.
There's no shortage of things to talk about. I was blown away by how much was announced. There was even some Star Wars stuff.
Because of the following special program, Wonder Woman and the Incredible Hulk will not be presented this evening.
It's time to get all your Star Wars news in a single file.
That doesn't sound too hard.
Boom! This is Making Tracks. This is the way. Here are your hosts, Mark Newbold and Mark Mulcaster.
I know these people. They are brutal. Does this look Jedi to you?
That's not how the Force works.
They'll never see it coming.
Count me in.
Lisa back.
So, welcome to Making Tracks. It's episode 201. We've got loads to talk about because D23's just happened. But it's a Star Wars summer, and usually we're chilling out. I'm definitely chilling out. Mark, are you enjoying your mini break?
I'm not in an air-conditioned suite today. I'm actually in my front room, but nowhere near as warm as my collection room.
Same. I could spend all day up there and often have, but not today.
Let it cool down by about 10, 15 degrees.
Why don't we just pile straight into the news? Because there's loads of cool stuff in there.
Let's do it.
D23 made loads of announcements, but one of the things that sort of kind of in a roundabout way got announced before was Skeleton Crew. We knew it was coming. We knew we'd got a December 3rd launch in the States and a December 4th launch here in the UK. But we did get that trailer, which was very warmly received over the weekend. What did you make of that trailer?
My first impression was, if we ever wanted to know what suburbia looks like in Star Wars, I think we're going to see it from Skeleton Crew. We've talked about it, and I know I've been relatively critical about the whole notion of kind of hanging tags on shows and films before we've seen the frame of it on screen. But yeah, doesn't this just give you like that E.T., Goonies, Amblin vibe? I really liked it. It was one of those kind of things that with Skeleton Crew, it's not so much I was ambivalent about it before. I just didn't really give it any thought. It's going to be maybe skewed a little bit younger. So we're not expecting Andor or even Acolyte angst or anything. This actually looks like one of the most Star Wars thing I've seen in a long time.
Totally agree. There was people having a bit of a grumble online, and I get that. It does look a little bit like you'd imagine a Star Trek suburbia to look like. But the point is exactly what you said. I looked at that shot down the street, you know, where the speeders go and the lawns in front of the house, and it is where Star Wars people live. And I still think 90% of people who live in the Star Wars galaxy live pretty much like we do here on Earth, except there's an Authorian delivering your mail. You know, as opposed to the guy here who turns up at 3 PM when he's ready. You know, it's that kind of vibe. So I really dug that. Suburbia in the Star Wars galaxy, and we've seen it made real. But you're totally right. They couldn't have leaned into that E.T. Goonies vibe more if they tried.
There's definitely a couple of shots in here, homages, at least to Goonies, which I'm more familiar with than, say, E.T. There's that skeleton, and they kind of go down that kind of water chute. I saw, I think it was an Instagram post or a tweet or something, where hopefully somebody had their tongue in their cheek when they posted it, but basically saying, Skeleton Crew is for kids. Hasn't it always been that way? That's what Star Wars is. Just the fact that those kids who saw it in 77 grew up, and we're still watching like 40 odd years later. So
completely. Yeah,
this could be the sleeper of the Disney Plus series this year. I think this will probably do really well. It looks like a very easy gateway into a galaxy far, far away, which I guess every series needs to be able to onboard new fans. This will probably capture fans that maybe a little bit younger, kind of like, I don't know, 10 or 11 maybe, which is a kind of age that actually I got into Star Wars, and you were kind of that kind of age when you got into Star Wars. And so you get the right vehicle, you get the right show, and there's enough toyetic stuff and there's enough merch that comes out. They're basically fans for life at that point.
Recently in Obi-Wan, we had young Leia. In the prequel trilogy, of course, we had young Anakin in Phantom Menace. You look back to the 80s when you had Cameron of Courage and Battle for Endor, which was kid-led. So it's not like we haven't had kids in Star Wars before. This isn't new.
The thing about the Amblin shows, it's going to be relatable. I didn't grow up in a big town. We were lucky we had a big common land behind where I lived and stuff. So that was where we spent our summers, from literally, you know, the day that school broke up, literally to the day that we had to go back. We were traipsing around all over the place, having all sorts of adventures. You know, if it feels a little bit overly familiar, a bit on the nose, I think I could probably forgive that, because I think it's a kind of show that we probably can a little bit more, because we don't need to take this one quite as seriously as I think, you know, maybe we have some of the other series that have come out recently.
I think it could be relatable to any age. because so many of us got into Star Wars when we were kids. So as we read and watched Star Wars and played Star Wars with our toys, these kids are living it. So there's a relatable aspect there. Also, a lot of Star Wars fans are parents or aunts or uncles. So I don't see why this wouldn't be relatable. Goonies had quite a range of, you went from younger kids right up to sort of mid-teens and up. With E.T., you got Elliot and Gertie and Michael. There was a bit of an age range there, but I think that made it relatable because they were experiencing meeting E.T. and in this, they're experiencing getting lost in the Star Wars galaxy because you see a classroom scene. We've seen a classroom scene in Mando. So you see a classroom scene here and you're going to see what the kids are learning and how they learn and what they're taught. I mean, that's important. What are they taught? So we might just see get a flavour of that as well.
It'd be quite interesting to know what the syllabus is. Right, kids, we're going to learn about the rise of the Empire and going a lot deeper than they would need to in the show. But you could imagine there would be planets and stuff. It would be like, we're not talking about the Force. We're not teaching our kids about the Force, or we're not teaching kids about Purge of the Jedi and stuff like that.
And how recently they consider history to start. When I was at school in the 80s, we were talking about World War One, not World War Two, even though that was only 40 years before. It wasn't something that was taught because it still felt too close. In the Star Wars galaxy, if you're talking about the Galactic Civil War, those little kids could have parents, aunts and uncles, grandparents who fought in that. And it's war, it's traumatic, so maybe it's too close to them. I mean, we might not get a sniff of what they're learning. If you're living on planet B, 90% of the syllabus might be about your home world, but you'd imagine in the Star Wars galaxy, you'd kind of have to know enough about other worlds and your syllabus would be broader, you think, wouldn't it?
Yeah, this has gone off on a way big tangent.
It has, hasn't it?
But at the same time, you would imagine, you do your local geography, science and stuff, which really relates to that planet. And the difference is that obviously, is how that then relates to the wider galaxy. But you could then imagine that it would quite easily be a galactic history lesson.
Because I suppose everything we learn on Earth is only relative to Earth because that's the only place we can go. If you're in the Star Wars galaxy and a little backwater world, and where does that world sit in the system, in the sector, in the region or whatever? So, that is a tangent, but this is why I'm looking forward to Skeleton Crew, because it's going to get us thinking about the galaxy in a different way, a little bit like The Acolyte was a different angle, historically a different angle. We know where this is in the Mando mix, so we kind of know what's happening in the galaxy at that point, but it's a totally different perspective on the galaxy.
Hi, this is Adrian Rawlins, and you're listening to Fantha Tracks.
So the weekend of Deadpool and Wolverine passing $1 billion at the global box office, and it's rocketing on. It's looking like it's going to make way more money than that. Shawn Levy was on the Happy, Sad, Confused podcast. He was talking about his upcoming Star Wars project, obviously not giving a lot away because, he'd probably get sniped by somebody at Disney if he did. But speaking to Josh Horowitz, Josh asked where we are with the film and whether or not we could see some familiar faces. He's obviously leaning in and asking, hey, are we going to see Hugh Jackman and Ryan Reynolds in your Star Wars project? Levy doesn't bite. He doesn't say anything other than, with a smile, you're asking the right questions. So he's hinting at maybe, who knows? And he's also worked with a lot of other actors apart from Hugh and Ryan, who are definitely the flavour of the moment, and rightfully so, with that mega hit doing so well. But my question to you, Mark, is in terms of Shawn Levy coming in after having this huge hit, would you be happy to see Hugh Jackman and Ryan Reynolds in a Star Wars project if they were under masks or if they were voicing characters or they're just full face on? Where do you sit with that?
That's the age-old question, isn't it? It's always a bit of a tough one because let's take Force Awakens or the sequel trilogy. There's quite a few cameos in that from different people. Daniel Craig in Force Awakens took me about 3 viewings to cotton on to the fact which one he was and where he was. And then after that, it doesn't take me out of it because like the first initial viewing, I suppose it's how obvious they are. I mean, obviously, like Deadpool and Wolverine, that film has got very distinctive style. And for example, if there was a couple of stormtroopers walking through an Imperial corridor and then one basically turns to the camera and starts talking to him, well, then I'd probably be like, okay, that's not right. But
Phoebe Waller-Bridge didn't do it, did she? So why should Ryan Reynolds do it? Yeah.
Well, exactly. And I suppose it all depends, really, doesn't it, on how on the nose it is, And I think sometimes some actors quite happy to let them be recognisable, and other times they could be a little bit too recognisable, and therefore might be better under a mask or costume. But both of those guys have probably earned a little cameo and a Black Series action figure, I think, after them. So I'm game. What about you?
Yeah, it's tricky for exactly the same reasons. I think Star Wars was always very smart. I mean, from the beginning, you had name people in there. Back in the day, it was Cushing and Alec Guinness, and those were the names. And it's not like Harrison Ford hadn't done stuff before. He'd been in Coppola films, and and he'd been in it around, but not a mega name.
No.
Carrie Fisher was definitely a name because of who her parents were. And Mark Hamill was known from soaps in the States, but they weren't mega names. So them coming in, you didn't really bring any baggage with them. The first one to me that didn't bring baggage, because I can't not see him in that role, but Liam Neeson had been Oscar nominated for Schindler's List. So to me, he was the one that really, oh wow, I'm watching Liam Neeson. And it took a little bit of time to forget that I was watching Liam Neeson. Whereas Hugh McGregor, who was fairly fresh into his acting career, and he'd done Trainspotting, he'd done Shallow Grave, Life Less Ordinary, and then he gets to episode 1. D23 really highlighted this for me. It's got Pixar, it's got Marvel, it's got the regular Disney output, and Star Wars is in that block. When they did the Epic Games stuff, and Feige comes out, and Pete Docter comes out, and Filoni comes out, you've got your heads of department for each one coming out and speaking to the audience about their elements of Fortnite. That felt like Star Wars was now very much a block of Disney. And the point is that in Deadpool and Wolverine, for example, which is like the most fourth wall breaking thing you're probably ever going to see, you can do these in jokes that, and goodness knows they did. You couldn't do that in Star Wars. If Ryan Reynolds is in it, be a jocular, funny, humorous smuggler, but you can't look at the camera and wink and say the proposal.
So for me, it's a little bit like watching the end of a Skeleton Crew trailer, and it's like, oh, it's Jude Law. And so it'll be interesting to see when I watch it whether or not I'm like thinking Jude Law, if I'm thinking whatever that guy's name is, Jared. Nobody.
Jodna Narwood, I think his name is.
Something like, there you go. See, my name was better, but
it was, yeah.
But so I think there's that, and I think also it wasn't really until I was probably about 14, 15 that I knew who Peter Cushing and Alec Guinness was, and I think maybe part of this is just down to how present like these actors are in social media as well. Ryan Reynolds is all over social media, obviously, especially right now because of Deadpool. Whereas obviously you didn't get that even with really the beginning of like the prequel trilogy. I equated Samuel L. Jackson to Pulp Fiction. So that was a little bit of a weird adjustment, because every now and again you'd expect him to swear or something. That's kind of just a risk. And you can't get a $250 million movie or series off the ground with like nobodies, like you could back in 77 when it was only like $11 million.
The sequel trilogy, you mentioned it earlier, Danny Craig's in there. There's rumours of other people in there that may or may not have been in there. We know Tom William Hardy and Harry were there, and we know Gary from Tape, that was in there, and Ed Sheeran was in there, and the directors can bring their pals in and put them in these little sequences. If there's little things like that, that's all well and good. Yeah. But I just wonder whether or not Shawn Levy, because he's just had this amazing success, who would want to say no to bringing those people together? Because outside of Star Wars, in the very real world, show business, if you can have on the poster Hugh Jackman and Ryan Reynolds and there as characters in there, that's another marketing thing that's going to bring in a decent demographic of people who love what they did in Deadpool and Wolverine and all the other stuff they do.
I think it all depends, doesn't it? I mean, because it was like when Joseph Gordon-Levitt played that alien in Canto Bight scene. He was the one who moaned to him about parking on the beach. I don't know if it was just badly acted, but it just didn't work. I mean, and he was in a mask, so I mean, I couldn't tell it was him, but it just seemed like somewhere along the lines, somebody got a little bit too creative, or maybe listened a little bit too much to a talent or something that probably shouldn't have. I don't see Hugh Jackman or Ryan Reynolds tramping over Star Wars in that way just to kind of maybe get a cheap pop. I think if they're going to be in it, they probably want to be in it in a decent kind of size role. How the franchise has developed, just now part and parcel. We can't have these kind of fresh virgin actors who have never done anything before kind of like helming these big series, because the shareholders just won't greenlight it because it'll be like it's too much risk.
I'm Brian Herring, BB-8 puppeteer, and you're listening to Fantha Tracks. That'll learn you.
So one of the other treats from D23 was the reveal of some footage from The Mandalorian and Grogu. It's been in production for quite a few weeks by the sounds of it. So they did reveal, and I say they, being Jon Favreau and Dave Filoni, did reveal something from the film. Didn't see a huge amount, but what we did see looked pretty damn impressive. We saw a cockpit shot, seemed to be the Razor Crest, or a Razor Crest. In there with them was Zeb from Rebels, who we'd already seen in Mando Season 3. And then a second shot of an AT-RT running down what looks like a snowbank on Hoth, and at the end of that run, turning into laser fire from two great big AT-ATs coming towards them. What did you make of this footage? I didn't expect to see moving live action footage from Mandalorian and Grogu, especially considering it's still 2 years away from coming out.
To be fair, mildly surprised actually, because that's what kind of hit my newsfeed first before Skeleton Crew trailers and stuff. It took a little while to find a copy to actually view, which again is one of those annoying things. But then looking at it, there wasn't much footage. If you actually look at it, it sets up the story a little bit, kind of like you see how they first meet, and then there's voiceovers to almost catch you up as to like where they are.
Yeah.
And then you've just got that stuff at the end. So I'm sure they were quite eager to show people something sooner rather than later. And, you know, what we got was, lots of snowtroopers, so a couple of AT-ATs, so not a huge amount, but I think enough just to kind of like maybe wet the whistle. May 2026 release. So yeah, we've got a couple of years to wait for that. My hope is that we get a proper feature-length feeling Mando episode, so they don't kind of go too crazy with it. It just feels like a big screen version. That's how it felt to me.
It certainly looked good what we saw, and I don't know whether that's completed, finished, wrapped up visuals, or whether that's early doors stuff, because Marvel does something very cool. They did it. We got one of the Guardians films, Guardians 2, I think. They've been filming for like a week, and they put a trailer together.
Yeah.
And then we saw some footage from Fantastic Four. You saw Galactus sort of look into a window, and you saw Herbie in the corner, which is very cool if you watch the old Fantastic Four cartoons back in the day. So there was some neat stuff there. Now you've got something similar in the Star Wars realm. If you're at D23 and you're Lucasfilm, I mean, there was the indie announcement about the new ride at Animal Kingdom coming to Disney World, which is great news. And Harrison Ford and Frank Oz and John Williams were made Disney legends, but not purely for Star Wars. They've done other stuff within Disney, obviously, and their other work outside of it. You can kind of put your hooks into that. But when you've got Marvel putting out the amount of content that they did, was the animated stuff, season 3 of What If, Friendly Neighborhood Spider-Man cartoon, season 2 of X-Men 97, not to mention all the other stuff that they mentioned in terms of films. And coming off San Diego Comic-Con when they reveal Robert Downey Jr., Star Wars needed to put something out there as well, didn't it?
Yeah, it really did. Whilst these are two massive franchises, they're not competing, but they kind of are a little bit, especially when it comes to like May cinema releases. That's prime real estate. So it'll be interesting to see how schedules fall. But that's it. Star Wars is a block in the Disney pantheon now. We need to get some movies out, get some buzz talking again, get a little bit of, I think, maybe confidence back into the market. I mean, I wasn't expecting anything from Mando and Grogu. I'd kind of heard that they had kind of started filming, but I was just like, not had any real announcement really since Celebration last year when it was announced. I was just starting to think, is this going to go away with like all the other film announcements recently where it drifts off into the ether or into like some kind of quagmire of development? With this, you think they're probably miles ahead. They've got the designs for, it's not like they've had to kind of come up with everything from scratch.
No, exactly.
It's probably a really safe way of doing it. It's like, well, we know we've got these two characters who are popular. We've got the kind of world pretty much built already anyway. So do you think that's Hoth, or do you think that we're going to go somewhere else? Would that be one of those nostalgia kind of things that they just kind of put in and go, okay, it's going to be Hoth, and that's where the Imperials took over the Rebel base?
I wouldn't be averse to going back to Hoth, because we've never been back to Hoth, really.
No.
Outside the comics, there's been comics that have gone back there for brief things. So if they did go back to Hoth, there needs to be some reason why they go back to Hoth. There needs to have been something there or something left there or something of consequence, and a reason, obviously, for Mando to go there, because Hoth's way out. It's a long way to be sort of in the middle of nowhere. So I'd be interested to see if it was Hoth. And in the spirit of, Stargate only going to desert planets and, forest planets, there must be other ice worlds. We saw Maldo Kreese, didn't we, in Mando, that was kind of Hoth-ish. Even when you go back to the early development of Force Awakens, when a lot of people thought that it was going to be Tatooine and they kind of made a late shift to make it a new world, whether or not that's the truth, we'll hopefully find out when Rince's book eventually arrives. That isn't unusual, because Geonosis is kind of a rocky red planet Mars vibe.
Yeah.
And then you stack it up next to Tatooine. In some sequences in Attack of the Clones, it's hard to tell which world is which if you're not kind of following it closely. So I'd love it if it was Hoth, but if it isn't Hoth, I'm fine with it as well.
One of our main Mandalorian quest givers is no longer with us. Carl Weathers. He'll be on a big screen, even more sorely missed. So it'd be interesting to see what happens, because obviously at the end of the last season of Mando, like they've settled on Navarro. They've kind of got their own little land out of the way. So it'd be interesting just to see if they bring mention of that. I mean, there will be some tip of a hat, as it were.
Oh, definitely. But you can imagine in the storytelling terms that Grief had such gratitude for what Mando had done and gave him that plot line. He opposite him at the start of season 3, and then he finally takes it at the end. That I don't know who the new mayor of Navarro is going to be. It could be a complete opposite. It could be, get the hell off my land, Mandalorian. So there's different plot things you can imagine would prompt him to be back out there doing what he's doing. Not that Star Wars is ever out in the news. There's always news. There's always something going on, or something coming out, or a comic or a book or whatever. But just to keep it in the public's sort of line of sight.
Because that's it. There's two different levels, and there's the level of it's quiet for Star Wars news for me and you. You've got to have something that's really going to punch through to the public zeitgeist and onto the Twitter feeds and stuff like that, which may not necessarily have people who are following a Star Wars hashtag.
One other thing on that point is in May 26th, we're also going to see an addition to Smuggler's Run, Millennium Falcon ride at Galaxy's Edge. They're adding Mando and Grogu into that ride. It kind of means that the canonical this is set between Last Jedi and Rise of Skywalker-ness of it is depleted a little bit because Mando and Grogu are there. So they're taking that edge away from Galaxy's Edge, if that makes any sense, and just making it more, and I say generic, it's not meant as a negative term, but they are sort of broadening the horizons. We do see other costume characters now come into the park, like Mando and Grogu. So they are making it more of a generic Star Wars location, not tied to a time quite so much. One other thing that was noticeable was that they've announced a big Avatar expansion. Yes. They've also announced the Disneyland Paris Lion King expansion, which by all accounts means that there won't be any kind of Star Wars presence at Disneyland Paris outside of Star Tours. There was plans to do, I think what people have said was like a mini Galaxy's Edge. Yeah. So it's notable that Avatar, which they announced Fire and Ash as the title of the third film, and they talk about a fourth film, there's stuff from these future Avatar films in this new location. I think it's at Disneyland in Anaheim, but now the Star Wars expansion at Paris is not happening in lieu of a Lion King area. What do you make of that? It's great they're adding to Smuggler's Run. I think they're right, like you say, make it a Star Wars hub. That makes all the sense in the world to the broader public. But there's not additions, there's not expansions to Star Wars. There's now no Galactic Star Cruiser, of course, as we know. It's been gone a year and there's no word on that coming back. It does seem like the Star Wars footprint it's not shrinking massively. It's a massive place, Galaxy's Edge, and it's in two locations, but they're not expanding it more, which I think was the expectation, wasn't it?
Yeah, I think the hope was that it would have ended up in Disneyland Paris and further afield as well. I'm sure they've got the metrics and I'm sure they've looked at it and seen what works. The general things are resonating with the average Disneyland ticket holder. So, I mean, it's a shame. At one point, there was discussion about it would have been the Falcon ride. And so there would have just been a little bit of extra dressing in the Galaxy's Edge vibe. Nothing's ever dead with Disney and that. So they might decide to bring it back, or they just go, well, actually, no, we're going to do something completely different. Maybe they go, actually, we'll put a Mando and Grogu ride, like the Rise of the Razor Crest or something. And that is copyrighted to me, Disney. So we're 2 years away from the Mando film, and I'm hoping we'll see another $1 billion Star Wars film.
For everything in one location, daily news, reviews, interviews, podcasts, video, and social media feeds, bookmark FanthaTracks.com for Star Wars news 24/7, 365.
So London Film and Comic Con took place in early July. We had an absolute blast. We were involved in the Star Wars zone. And as part of that, we had the second stage to oversee. We spoke to loads of Star Wars guests, including Skeleton Crew star Marti Matulis, who obviously couldn't talk an awful lot about Skeleton Crew, but he could talk a lot about Mandalorian and his role as Vane in that show. So here's myself and Marti Matulis at London Film and Comic Con on the second stage in the Star Wars zone.
Hello, Marty.
Hello, Mark. How are you?
I'm very well. How has your London Film and Comic Con experience been so far?
It's been fantastic, and through the fog of jet lag, it's been there's an extra special layer of excitement.
And where have you travelled in from?
We came in from the States. I live in the Pacific Northwest, around Portland, Oregon area.
Okay.
Yeah, so we did that as a hop over the last day. A bit of a return trip to the airport this morning just to grab a bag. It finally caught up. It wanted to have a vacation in Iceland. I said, no, I need you here.
That old chestnut.
Yeah.
So what have you made of the show so far? Is it your first UK show?
It is, yeah. I'm very thrilled to have it as my first. It was just fun.
Yeah, and meeting folks and chatting about all sorts of things.
It's, apart from doing the thing itself, having the involvement in the Star Wars world, talking to the fans is absolutely my favorite thing. As a fan myself, I mean, I was 7 years old when Star Wars came out. I was right in the pocket.
Yeah.
So it's lovely to share that joy.
It's funny we're about the same age, and so when the film comes out, it grabs you as a kid, it stays with you all these years, and then you get the opportunity to be a part of it. That must be very special.
Yeah, it was having done this type of work, prosthetics and makeup and creatures and whatnot for the better part of 20 years, finally cracking into the Star Wars world was absolutely a dream job. There's no question about it.
Tell us a bit about the work you've done prior to your work in Star Wars.
Varieties of creepy critters, but largely anything that comes to me is oftentimes through the makeup artists who I've befriended and worked with over the years. And, I commonly tell people they're typically types that they're looking for their work. They either want to be able to build something out on a thin frame that doesn't look overly built, or they need someone huge who can support a very heavy suit, or small and contortionist. So I've put in my time building relationships and showing my reliability to these makeup artists as out of respect for their work. My initial interest was in makeup, and I would make myself look strange for Halloween. So then getting to work with people who chose to do this as a career and really develop their craft, it's always been a joy for me to sit in their chair and observe this process happen by very talented people.
Yeah.
So it was just kind of a natural thing with my temperament to be respectful of their work and not destroy it at lunchtime and eat a pizza with my face.
Gotcha.
And then also have a training as an actor to be able to bring something to their work, to show it in the best light.
I spoke to Rissa earlier, obviously doing the stunts and the sort of work she does, all that kinetic stuff, and that's a skill in and of itself. But there's also the performance with it, and it strikes me that folks like yourself who are patient enough, not claustrophobic enough, all the other aspects, that go along with the prosthetic world, that's another skill entirely. So what, other than you mentioned frame and certain aspects, physical aspects, what else do you think you bring to it that makes you so employable, because it's not for everybody?
Very flexible eyebrows. If you can move the makeups, which typically comes down to, depending on the thickness of the material, if you have something applied to your face, how can you best animate that material to look natural? I think that as a fan of science fiction and fantasy, and then also as an actor in these makeups, I don't like to see it when I see something on TV that looks like a rubber mask.
Yeah. Oh, it's the whales, don't worry.
Perfect. So I do put a certain amount of effort into paying attention to what's happening in the mirror as the makeups are going on. Once things are glued on, seeing if what I'm doing translates well to the makeup, and if not, making whatever adjustments are necessary to make it read well, and then reminding myself that with this particular makeup I might have to do 20% more effort to emote in a reasonable way.
And I guess because you've done it for a while now, and you've got relationships with these people who do the prosthetics, that when you get to a point where you feel it's not quite there, you've got the knowledge and the skill base to make suggestions, and it's a shorthand. That's what I'm trying to say. I guess you can make that work quicker.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, certainly I don't have much involvement in design, but during application, because I'm on the inside of it and I can feel what's happening, I've been able to suggest, certain types of, if we need to make the fit better, or if something's getting off whack, or if one eye, oftentimes there'll be two makeup artists for the sake of timing. Someone's on the right, someone's on the left, and oftentimes you can see or feel the effect. My contribution in the middle is to even the team out, and then go off and play monster.
So when you get the role of Vane, this thing comes along for Mando. One, it's a massive hit already, so you know you're going into something that's already a hugely successful thing.
Right.
And also you're a Star Wars guy, so that's an added little tick in the box.
So great.
When you walk in for the first time, sit down with the guys, I'm presuming, or rather assuming, that they sketch out what you're going to do, what it's going to look like. You're a Star Wars fan, so you kind of know what a Nikto is because of Jedi, so you've got a sense of that. So what were your thoughts when you realised for a start, you're playing a classic species from Star Wars? I mean, that must have been a blast for a start.
I was thrilled, and as has historically happened, they've been rubber pullover masks.
Yeah.
But since I've been in the business so long, I know that there are a lot of copies of my head at various shops. So I did a little research, did a little Googling, found out who the department head was, sent off an email. Hello, you don't know me, but I was just cast as if you want, I could probably get. And they said, no. we already have a copy of her head and we're sculpting because we want to see this character as a makeup.
Yeah.
So they saw the opportunity to build something special, which matched my desire to do something special. And obviously Shauna's work with her costume department, they really built a beautiful special costume.
Yeah.
And all of these things came together. There was one day when we did a full makeup application and full costume test, which historically for me has been just a small handful of people.
Yeah.
On this day, it was, I think, maybe a dozen people. They kept coming in saying, are you ready? Because we have to coordinate all of the Zooms and the phones and whatnot.
Yeah.
It was everyone checking to make sure that this creation was working for them. And I think that was the day that was the biggest dawning realization of the size of this, the scope of this, and the importance of the character. So I cranked it up to 11 and gave them as much as I could of the character so they could see how much the face would emote and then what they could do with it, which turned out to be not kill him on the first day after all and let him live on.
Did you think it was going out on the first day?
It was written as such, that he was going to be one of... they were going to send off someone else, so I was the one that caused the trouble, so I was the one that was going to be eliminated. But because of all the work they put into him, I think they saw that, it would behoove them all to extend their investment.
Yeah. That's fascinating because, I mean, this has happened in Star Wars before. I think it happened with Oscar Isaac with Poe. I think originally he was supposed to die and J.J. liked what he saw, so they kind of kept him around. So, but with yourself, with a Nikto, as you say, in Jedi, it's a pullover mask, and now you've got so much more opportunity to emote, as you say. One of the striking things about the character is the eyes. The eyes really stand out. So you as a professional must have been thrilled knowing that whatever you did, whatever the translation of the prosthetics to the performance was, it was enough to make them go, there's something in this guy. The character and you, obviously.
Yeah, I mean, I'm absolutely serving their makeup, and one of the things, of course, is to see, as I said, not just how it moves, but where the light's going to hit. He has a lot of material up here, so doing whatever I can to make their work shine for the sake of the people whose project it is of utmost importance. And then seeing the result of it on the other side as a fan and an actor, when the show comes out, then I get to see if what I was hoping would happen happened.
Yeah.
The reverse engineering on the backside of it is fun as well. But yeah, I was happy with how the character looked, and I appreciate what you said about the eyes because I knew that's where I had the most control.
Yeah.
So there was a lot of side eye, a lot of wide eye, and getting as much light into him to see what he was thinking, of course. Is the best thing to watch.
And it's Star Wars, so every I mean, we know this as fans, every minuscule detail will be slavishly looked at and looked over. So from a production point of view, because you're honouring what's gone before and you want to make that work, so the two things tally up. But of course, one, you're in a massive hit show, and two, it's Star Wars, so they want to finesse the details.
Yeah.
How much detail is gone into? How much is it looked? You mentioned the Zoom calls to go over everything. I'm assuming they're looking at every inch of that costume and prosthetic and everything else.
Doug Chang was 2 inches from my face, just inspecting every little thing. And then on the Zoom, of course, Jon Favreau was in one, and I was giving him a heaping, can I say any bad words on it? A heaping pile of shit.
You're good.
Just kind of ridiculing him. I wanted to give them their character and let them see. Sorry, jet lag just kicked in. What were we talking about? What was it?
Don't worry, we'll bounce around. It's all good. I'm just thinking that because the character is so unique in the scope of that show as well. He's a villain, but he gets plenty of face time. You kind of get a sense of what he's all about. How much were you able to bring to that? I mean, it's your performance, but how much were you able to sort of eke out these extra little bits? Because I can't now not think something you did must have really hit the nail because he was written to go and he's not, he's still around. So what did you draw on to bring the character of Vane so vividly to life?
Well, certainly I didn't want to, cover any ground that's been covered before in other pirate-type realms or franchises.
Yeah. No Captain
There's obviously
Jack
going to be some amount of similarities. Obviously, Vane has a penchant for the spirits, just in the wrong geography. But yeah, with the voice, the only thing that I was told was he was British, and he's a pirate, and I was given the sides for the shootout. So it was up to me to come up with a voice. I don't think that they had any notes on that. What I did was fine. A lot of the character came out in the blocking rehearsal after the audition. I mean, they clearly liked what was happening there, so I just based that was my foundation.
Yeah.
And then on the day, you know, they're making sure more that there's consistency, not a lot of shift in character performance.
Yeah.
So as long as what I was doing was consistent with what I'd done, that seemed to be fine for everyone. And then it's just more a matter of navigating what they know of where they're going, which isn't what I know. Yeah. I know what I'm doing now because that's all they tell you. You get the pieces of paper for what you're doing in the moment. So the holders of the larger vision would kind of guide you along that path in direction.
And do you prefer that? I mean, as a fan, do you prefer just knowing your bit? Because in life, you only know your bit, really. And then you can sit back at the end 6 months, 8 months, 9 months later and watch it with family and go, well, there it is.
That is a difficult one. In doing the work, it is very beneficial to only know what your character knows. And I recognize that, and I also hate it. Because as a fan, I really do. And well, also I'm a writer and a photographer and an editor, and I like to know the scope of things.
Sure.
So there is a desire to want to know A to Z, of course, but no, I'm quite satisfied just knowing what I know and trying to dispense with the rest and see it because then I get no spoilers other than the ones I'm in. And
you can't spoil things if you don't know it, so
they could put me to the screws and I wouldn't give up an inch.
He returned, he came back.
He did.
I mean, we saw him later, so it seems that he's kind of got his own little gang going on by the second time. Little gang. He's got his own gang when we see him the second time.
As long as they're useful.
Exactly. Well, they're not useful for very long, are they?
And once they die.
Exactly. And so you must have been thrilled when the call comes to bring this character back, because any long-running show, and I mean we're only 3 seasons in really, but it's been on for 5 years, so it's got some tenure now. Anytime you can return a fan favourite character, be they a good guy or a bad guy, and I'm sure Vane sees himself as completely the good guy.
Of course,
but, you know,
it must his way in the world.
Yeah, it must be fun to be able to come back and just flesh out even more and add even more layers to a character.
It's a dream scenario. Most of what I've done, by nature of what it is, it's a single episode experience.
Yeah.
And then it's gone. Occasionally others, Evil has some extensions, but this character in particular, I think is probably one of the longest I've played. So yeah, it's delightful to be able to explore that. I was going to say about that. There was a better follow-on that I had for you, and jet lag got me again. Yeah, it is lovely to be able to play him for a longer period of time, for sure.
Yeah, because, as I say, there's villains in Star Wars. There's your peak villains, there's your Vaders and Emperors and characters like that. And then you kind of can, because it's been around for so long, 47 years, right. you can work your way down to the street-level characters. It's a bit like Marvel, isn't it? You've got your gods like Thor and your street-level guys like Daredevil, and there's everybody in between. And Star Wars is kind of the same. You know, and Vane, you would kind of think he feels like a street level villain. Right, does that make sense?
Yeah, and the fact that they're giving him a little bit of a light, it's fun. It was a treat finding out that he would get to come back, and then having the opportunity to explore him more as that kind of like just a scrubby little whoever he is. In the sense that Andor also appealed to me, it was very much man on the street within this realm that we didn't always get to see. It was always these heightened, important characters, and I adore that you can bring as much importance as you want to any strata if the writing is good, if the development is good. So yeah, as long as they want to see what this opportunistic pirate, how he can squeak out of the next little tricky situation, I'm down to explore that.
It feels like his life is continuous little just nudging out of it.
He's just smart enough. He's just a good enough pilot. He just can't quite catch a break, but he's catching enough of a break to not die.
Yes.
He's in a sweet spot, really.
That's all we can hope for, any of us, isn't it?
I think so. He's eking away.
He will be back again. We can't talk about it, but you must be thrilled.
We can talk just enough because I was here for Celebration to see the teaser trailer that acknowledged and confirmed that yes, he is going to land over in, shall we say it, Skeleton Crew, which we don't know when it's coming out, but word around the campfire does seem to indicate it will be this year.
Yeah.
In what capacity? Don't know, but we can assume he's consistent.
He's the good guy now. He's the good guy.
Yeah, exactly. He's become soft and cuddly.
Like all Niktos do.
Yeah. It's only a matter of time.
And that must have been fun. I mean, different people involved, not completely different people, but different folks involved, different cast involved.
Yeah.
To see him bounce off different characters, from what we know about Skeleton Crew, younger characters, must have been, again, it's more fleshing out. It's another interesting aspect.
Yeah, and at the time, all I knew is all kind of what we know now. Jude Law, kids, John Watson, Christopher Ford at the helm, which thrilled me to no end.
Absolutely.
To see what they did with the Tom Holland Spider-Man films that they put together. Obviously, their love of 80s cinema.
Yeah.
John Hughes films obviously came into the Spider-Man things. What's been said on the internet, I can say seems to match what I was seeing them do. They have I think it's been described as like kind of a Goonies in Star Wars space, inherent in the kid casting, but also kind of in the love and the feel that they're putting into this peril / is it really peril? I don't know, but yeah, pirates, kids, Star Wars space, and those guys at the helm. We felt like we were in a good place to both explore and kind of homage the 80s films that I grew up loving.
It sounds like a great mix because we've got Acolyte now, and that's its own thing, and we've got Andor. You just mentioned that's another tone entirely, and Mando's its own tone, and it feels like Skeleton Crew is going to be its own tone. It's nice to have all these different flavors in Star Wars now, isn't it?
It is. Yeah, you can craft and maintain a broad audience. You know, I see a lot of the criticisms out there on the internet of certain franchises. How can you though? It's all Star Wars, and as you said, you know, there's something for everyone in this, whether age bracket or interest level. So I'm always excited to see more Star Wars things come out. Because we've got to all be fans, or like, what are we doing?
Exactly. It's here to love, isn't it? That's the whole point.
Absolutely.
And so, finally, before we get back to your signing booth, it's Friday as we speak. Saturday will always traditionally be really busy at London Film and Comic Con. Are you ready for the rush?
I'm going to get, let's hope for a solid 12 hours of sleep tonight, and then I will be absolutely ready tomorrow.
So you're an optimist?
Yes, at heart.
Brilliant. Really
and
enjoyed
if not, coffee as my support system.
Coffee is everyone's support system.
Perfect.
Brilliant. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mark. Appreciate it.
So in addition to all the other cool reveals at D23, there is something else coming our way on the 13th of September. All 4 episodes of Lego Star Wars Rebuild the Galaxy will drop. It's got a fantastic cast revealed already. Gaten Matarazzo from Stranger Things, Tony Revolori from the Spider-Man trilogy, Marci Martin, Bobby Moynihan, of course, we know from a load of good stuff, including Saturday Night Live, Michael Cusack, Ahmed Best back as Jar Jar, Mark Hamill's in there as well, and he's also a consulting producer. And there's all sorts of other names coming back. Naomi Eki, Anthony Daniels, Kelly Marie Tran, Billy D. Williams, and all the names you'd expect. D. Bradley Baker, Jennifer Hale, Phil Lamar, Ross Marquand, Matthew Wood, Sam Whitworth, Shelby Young, amongst others. So it's an awesome cast, and it looks like great fun. I'm so looking forward to it because 1, Lego Star Wars rocks, and 2, it's having a bit of fun with Star Wars. What did you make of the trailer, Mark?
Massively good fun. That is basically for what if for Star Wars, because obviously, like, Lego being, you know, the parody of just that and every franchise, you know, you can't but help see that it's taking a little poke at you know, multiverse and stuff like that. So you've got a Luke Skywalker who looks more like Dad Bod 4 from like Endgame and that, which looks fantastic, and like you said, voiced by Mark Hamill. And one thing I always love about Lego is the overabundant use of MacGuffin, and it's always really nice and easy to follow. It just takes you off into some crazy places. So very excited to see Darth Jar Jar finally on the screen.
It looks like huge fun. We saw the Dark Falcon a while ago, and other little elements were sort of floating around about what this could be about. I think I think we talked about it on the podcast, whether or not this could be a what if in live action, and whether or not we'd even want that. I think we both kind of lean towards not wanting that, because if you get to a live action what if outside of a multiverse like Marvel, for example, if you can't come up with stories for Star Wars, there's a problem. In the Lego Star Wars realm, which they've absolutely nailed for so long, consistently well for so long, this is gravy. This just looks like so much fun. I can't wait for this.
I'm not a Lego collector because I'm not a Lego builder.
Yeah.
But it's just for a clever way that they can get the build mechanics into like everything and use it as clever ways to just get people out of the most ludicrous of dead ends. And I'm really looking forward to it. I'm looking forward to seeing the Ewok bounty hunters. And, it looks great. You compare this to like one of the early Lego animations and the quality of animations just massively increased, as it should do over time. Can't wait for that. So lots of things coming down the pipe later on, lots of things to look out for and to get excited about. So that means that there's only one thing that you can do, and that is to send in your listeners questions about maybe some of these new upcoming projects. So either if you've got a question or a thought or theory, or just like you just want to have a moan or a pop, by all means. And as always, Mr. Newbold can tell you how you can get in touch.
Email radio@fanthatracks.com. Head to links.fanthatracks.com for links to our social media feeds, Fantha Tracks TV and Fantha Tracks Radio. Thanks to James Semple for the Fantha Tracks intro, Blues Harvest for our Making Tracks opening music, and Mark Daniel and Vanessa Marshall for our voiceovers. New episodes drop Tuesdays and Fridays at 7 o'clock UK time. Our weekly news show, Good Morning Tatooine, goes live Sundays at 9 o'clock UK time on Facebook and YouTube. And remember, Fantha Tracks is absolutely free, so it costs nothing to stay updated on all the latest Star Wars news.
And that's me done for this episode, Mark.
Excellent. I think it's me done for this episode as well. So on that note, I declare that this episode is drawn to a close. And for everybody out there, stay frosty. Have a fantastic Star Wars week, whatever that means to you. And until the next episode of Making Tracks, may the Force be with you.
Coming up next on Fantha Tracks Radio, it's Desert Planet Discs.